Hey, how's it going? Today we're going to play some games with Hydreigon EX. Now first I'm going to go over the deck list, and then there will be a couple of games, and then at the end of the games I will go over where I think this deck stands in the meta, what I would change about the list, and just my thoughts overall in the deck. Hydreigon is a 330 hit point, stage 2 dark type Tera Pokemon with an attack for dark colorless that does 200, and we discard the top 3 cards of our opponent's deck. And then its second attack for dark metal psychic colorless does 130 to the active and 130 to 2 of our opponent's bench Pokemon. Now these are all around just some pretty solid stats. The HP is wonderful. It can't be hit on the bench since it's Tera, and the second attack is kind of insane. You could take 6 prizes with 2 of those attacks. The cost of the attack may make it seem kind of unachievable, but it actually happens a lot easier than I originally thought with the counter gain and the Neo Upper Energy. First of all, counter gain, that's another new card. It's a reprint. It says if we're behind on prizes, the Pokemon this card is attached to's attacks cost 1 colorless less. And Neo Upper Energy, of course, says if this is attached to a stage 2 Pokemon, it counts as 2 rainbow energies. So with this combo, as long as we have a dark energy attached to the Hydreigon beforehand and we're behind on prizes, we can attach Neo Upper and counter gain and be ready to use the second attack. The Hydreigon is basically the only attacker in this deck, but we also can attack with the Pecharunt EX as long as we get an energy built up on it at some point throughout the game. Pecharunt is mostly here for its ability, which says we can switch a dark type Pokemon into the active and it is now poisoned, but its attack for 2 dark energy does 60 for each prize our opponent's taken. So if there's ever a turn that you just have a free attachment, attaching it here is never a bad option. We also have Pidgeot, of course, for support. The card is just broken and makes decks flow really well. So with that, we have the Lumineon Rotom V Sealstone Arven package, which just works really well for stage 2 decks. And of course we have Fezandipiti as well. We have Roseanne's backup. I think that's a solid card in this deck. It lets us recover a Pokemon, a tool, a stadium, and an energy card. So we can recover Neo Upper Energy with it. We can also grab back a counter gain and one of our 2 stadiums. The 2 stadiums we have are Town Store and Pokemon League Headquarters. Town Store combos really well with Colress because Colress can grab us like Neo Upper Energy and Town Store, and then we can Town Store for counter gain, and if we have an energy already on our guy, we can get our second attack going. Pokemon League Headquarters is mostly because the first attack of Hydreigon is inherently disruptive, so I wanted to have an option to bump the stadium that wouldn't give our opponent anything. Like Artisan was the other stadium I was thinking about, and that would let them get a Pokemon, and this will just make it a little bit harder for them to attack. Now another new card we have in here is the Tera Orb. I'm not entirely sure yet if it's needed, but it is a really nice option. It says we can get a Tera Pokemon from our deck for free. So we can Arven for Tera Orb, and we don't have to worry about having to discard 2 cards with Ultra Ball. We also have Briar in here that says if our opponent has 2 prizes remaining and one of our Tera Pokemon knocks out our opponent's active, we can take an extra prize. So we can take just huge multi-prize turns with the second attack combined with Briar, like knock out an EX, take 3 prizes on that, and if we can knock out 2 little guys on the bench, that's 5 prizes in 1 turn, which is pretty solid. We are also getting extremely close to 1,000 subscribers, so thank you everyone for that, and if you haven't yet, think about subscribing, it would be greatly appreciated. There also is a lot of gusts in this deck in the 2 boss and the 2 counter catcher, but I will talk more about that after the games, so let's get into it. So this first game we are up against Charizard. They did win the coin flip and choose to go first. I was choosing to go first with this deck. I think evolving decks kind of have to go first right now just because Terapagos is around, but they got off to a pretty mediocre start, so it is essentially like we went first, which is fine. That's definitely something that's going to happen with any setup deck. With going first, it's just a risk you have to take. Now here, I spend a little bit too much time deciding if I want to Iono or just Colress for like Town Store and an energy just to get an energy attachment down, because I do find that getting an energy attachment turn 1 can be pretty important with this deck, and if we don't, we are just going to want to fall behind and attach to the bench. Or maybe you can get Neo Upper, but then things can get weird if we take too many prizes and don't have access to counter gain or Neo Upper Energy. So Yeah, I do get into an energy, so I attach to the Deino and mill a card. It hits a Duskull, which is pretty nice. Our opponent definitely wants to get Duskull in play. After we knock out this Radiant Charizard, a Dusknoir with a Charizard EX attack would allow them to knock us out, so definitely fine with hitting that. My opponent also has to play their own Iono for Arven. This does put a lot of liabilities on their bench, so hopefully we are going to get to take advantage of that at some point in the game. They just attach a Forest and Instant Draw or whatever it's called. Now, being able to boss would be pretty ideal here. I don't think that we're going to have access to that though. I'm going to have to candy Pidgeot and then Pidgeot for Arven, and then probably use Arven for like candy Forest and then Forest for... I was originally planning on foresting for a Vessel, but I really would like to keep access to both of these cards in my hand. And since there is no recovery in this deck, that is something that we're going to have to be careful about with discarding extra cards that we don't need to get rid of. Like the Fezandipiti and the Pecharunt, those both can come in pretty clutch. Like, we don't want to have a Hydreigon that maybe we evolve preemptively to get stuck in the active, and Fezandipiti might be able to bail us out of this pretty mediocre hand. But as you can see, I'm still considering grabbing Vessel. I was going to get rid of Fezandipiti because we do have access to Pidgeot, but playing TM Devo is not completely unheard of in Charizard, and if they just hit us with a Devo, we would be in a really rough spot. So I do decide to just grab the Dark, and it ends up paying off because we get a Dark off the prizes. My opponent fails the PAF in here. They do have their last Charmander in hand, and they counter catcher up my Lumineon. If I had to guess, they're going to knock that out with the Charizard. Charizard, I don't know, this whole engine just gets candy Pidgeot and then candy other stage 2 a lot of the time. It's kind of crazy. And they do grab candy Defiance Band. They don't need that right now, but that is a card to keep in mind for later in the game because it is going to allow them to knock out a Hydreigon with full HP after we've taken 4 prizes, as long as we are ahead. But I don't know if we're going to go ahead too often in games like this, unless, like a lot of these stage 2 decks, what my plan kind of is hit them for 200, mill a couple cards, and then do the second attack to knock out if they have little guys on the bench and finish off the knockout on their stage 2. We can also do it in the reverse order, like if they had another unevolved basic Pokemon on the bench, like a Duskull or something like that, I would just use the second attack right here, but they don't, so I'm going to end up using the first attack. I get ahead on an attachment, that is always nice. Just play the Iono, set my opponent's hand a little lower, and I even can Pidgeot for a Zweilous, I think it's called here. And I was thinking about evolving the Pokemon without the energy in case they choose to knock out one of my bench guys, since they can't one-shot my Hydreigon, but I figure might as well just evolve the one with the energy. It just makes more sense, and we can use the first attack again and mill more cards. And we hit Thornton. That is the perfect card, I think, to hit, because I am planning on using the second attack here if they don't evolve that Charmander. And Thornton is going to be the only way that they can get into a meaningful attack other than just Radzard. Now my opponent did make a mistake there. They forgot to use Pidgeot. They could have evolved their Charmander, or they could have just like grabbed a card to hold in their hand, but they don't do that. I'm guessing that they were worried about TM Devo because Devo would make sense in this deck, I guess. But you can't hit Tera Pokemon on the bench like Charizard, so you couldn't really set up a proper Devo play anyway. So here I grab the Tera Orb. You can see how nice it is with a hand like this. I don't have to worry about discarding cards, and I can knock out their, active and their 2 evolving basics, and also have a backup guy set up on the bench, and put Pecharunt in play to play around any stall shenanigans. So I consider this kind of like a checkmate board. They would need such a combo here to get Thornton back and Thornton Candy Zard. to be able to win the game, and they do boss, and then I think they realize that I have Pecharunt, so that was kind of pointless, and we do end up winning this game. So this game we are up against Ceruledge. Now this can be kind of a scary matchup because they do have access to Briar, and they also have the ability to one-shot us, and our first attack can end up kind of helping them out by discarding extra fire energies, which is kind of unfortunate, but this is definitely a winnable matchup. Now here I'm just considering if I want to bench the third Deino or not, and I do end up doing that. Kind of makes sense. You never know when these decks are playing like Greninja or something like that, so I want to, you know, be able to evolve these before they could do anything like that. They do have the Carmine into Squawk ability and just end up getting rid of a good amount of energy, and you know, they end up with a solid hand. They bench a Rotom and now Greninja, but oh wow, they're really kind of going crazy here. They're like halfway through their deck. This made me start thinking that maybe I have like some deck out win conditions against them. The only thing with that I've noticed is 3 cards a turn just is not enough to deck out our opponent. I had thought about kind of making this more of a deck out deck with the Durant EX and ways to pick it up, but I don't know if it will really ever be able to mill enough cards. Now I have a pretty solid hand here. I do end up playing this turn out really strangely, but that's only because I forgot that I have access to Pecharunt in this deck. Like this was the first game I think I played with the deck, and this whole turn I'm like, oh man, I didn't put any ways to switch in this deck. What am I thinking? I should probably add a rescue board, even though you don't want to board Rotom because he holds the Forest Seal Stone. So as you can see here, I was going to grab the Zweilous, but then I see the Pecharunt, like, oh yeah, I can just start attacking right now. So that is kind of nice. We definitely would like to, you know, maybe mill a couple recovery cards or maybe some of their Ceruledges or something like that. But we can get into the active. Oh, I also make a massive mistake here, and I should have used Pecharunt and then candied into Hydreigon. That's like really embarrassing, but that is one of the main reasons I wanted to show this game. I do think I make a couple mistakes that I think are probably pretty common for people to overlook, and you don't really realize how big of a mistake they could potentially be. Like after a couple turns here, this could make it so my opponent could hit me for 300 and I end up knocking myself out, which would just give them kind of a huge advantage. Or they wouldn't hit me for 300. They could knock me out for 1 less energy, I believe. Yeah, because if they did 310, it would knock me out. But they do end up knocking out my Pecharunt, which is a little annoying, but it's kind of fine. It's not like they're ever going to boss stall something in this matchup. They already have like half the amount of cards I do, so yeah, here I almost promote the wrong Pokemon, but yeah, always promote your free retreaters. It is very important to have the most options possible. Now I am going to Fezandipiti and see what I get into. This is the point where I was wondering, oh, maybe I could possibly deck them out, but they could definitely take their 4 prizes before I'm able to do that. So I'm just going to end up attaching the Neo Upper Energy, hitting into this guy for 130 and knocking out the Greninja and the Charcadet, basically trying to kind of catch up on the prize trade by hoping that they won't be able to get another Ceruledge going after I 2-shot this one, because I owned them to 4. I'm going to knock out their one that can evolve, and then next turn I'm going to knock out the active. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, because I am behind on the prize trade. They can probably knock me out next turn, and I Pidgeot for Roseanne's, which is another mistake. This is just a math problem here where they're going to knock me out and I'm still going to be behind on prizes after they knock out my active. For some reason I was thinking that we'd be at even prizes after that, so that is just another mistake. And it really would only make sense to grab that if I had already had an energy on a bench Deino so that I could threaten another one of the second attack, even though that wouldn't win me the game because it wouldn't knock out the active, so even that wouldn't make sense. Now here I really would like to Iono them and get into Candy Hydreigon. We want to remove as many options as possible from them. So I'm going to Iono first and then use Fezandipiti. I don't know if I can win the game without doing that or without disrupting their hands. So this is the way that we're going to do it. And this is also where a Briar would have won me the game, which made me remember like, oh wow, yeah, this deck can take advantage of Briar, so maybe I should do that. Or maybe I should put that in here, because I would have won the game this turn, because last turn I would have Pidgeotted for Zweilous instead of the Roseanne. And then after the Fez, as you can see, I would have hit the Ultra Ball off of the Fez, and then I could have Pidgeotted for Briar. Or assuming that the cards were in the same order, because I guess Briar would change everything. Here I make another mistake and I Ultra Ball away the boss instead of the counter catcher. I'm going down to 1 prize, so that makes absolutely no sense. I was thinking I have access to Lumineon and there's another boss in my deck, but I'm not counter catchering that turn. So it just really, that play made no sense. Like in the back of my head, I was considering counter catchering up the Fezandipiti, but yeah, I should have known I was had to knock out the active. But my opponent does end up Ultra Balling for a Sarah Ledge and then conceding. And I think the mill portion of the attack did end up winning us this game, because I do think I milled like 3 or 4 fire energies or a couple fire and a stretcher or something like that. So yeah, do end up taking that one down, but I mostly wanted to point out the mistakes that I made. Now this deck actually did surprise me, and I do think it definitely has potential to be a contender in the meta. Just being able to pretty reliably use the first attack, tank a hit, and then get into the second attack is extremely powerful. The main thing that needs to be added to the deck is a Dark Patch or 2 to be able to potentially power up the second attack in 1 turn, or be able to use the second attack back to back. Because that is the only way I could see this deck beating Raging Bolt, is if we can use the second attack twice in a row to basically take 6 prizes over 2 turns. That would be a pretty big combo, and also the 2 counter catcher would be needed for that to probably be able to gust a TLMS Gogurpon back-to-back turns. Dark Patch could also allow us to power up Pecharunt in 1 turn, which could definitely come in handy. The cut or cuts for the Dark Patches could be one of boss or counter catcher, Briar, or potentially Colress. I was finding that I didn't need to gust more than once in my matchups, so the one of the boss or counter catcher is definitely a fine cut. This deck also could play an Ursaluna. The League Headquarters could also be an Artisan, which would just add to the consistency, which would be nice, but League Headquarters also could potentially help against Raging Bolt, which is another reason that I like it. Overall though, I think Dark Patch is the one card that kind of needs to be in the deck. Access to a 1 prize attacker and like the more Peko with Free Retreat or something like that might be kind of nice with Dark Patch, because you could also use that to attack and then move the energy to your Hydreigon, and it would give you an answer to Mimikyu. The kind of built-in answer to stall decks is already here though in the Pecharunt and the Mill attack. But after playing the deck, it is a ton of fun and a lot stronger than I had thought it would be, so I think it definitely has a chance of being a good deck in the meta. Now this could just be new toy syndrome combined with people not playing the best decks on the ladder right now, so I'm playing suboptimal lists and not the strongest archetype, so it makes the deck seem stronger. That is definitely possible, but just after playing it, it seems like the deck has a lot of like tricks and answers to other decks and stuff like that. Now one thing, I don't know how people are playing it. I would imagine it's something like this. I've been avoiding the Limitless tournaments lately. Normally like I keep an eye on them to see what's doing well and stuff, but I have not been looking at them because I want to put out like my actual own build of the decks without outside input really. I find that we end up just settling on what is the correct deck and maybe a little too soon, so I wanted to be unbiased with my deck building for this set, and I have been having a lot of fun with it. So yeah, like or dislike, comment, and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.